You're counting down to a very important announcement at 11 o'clock, which is going to be up on our screens. It's embargoed until then, but in the meantime, and the people behind it, I understand, Liz MacPherson and Dr. Vivian Ivory, who are our next speakers, talking about building evidence, statistic tools and surveys.
No, not at all. In fact, how long have we actually got? Okay. All right, I've been told we've got 10 minutes each. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm Liz MacPherson. I'm the Government Statistician. And what I'm going to talk to you about, I think, builds really nicely on the material that Tom's just been moving through. And the announcement that we're talking about at 11 is, in fact, the latest regional GDP figures, which are going to be put on the screens at 11 o'clock, and so that'll build on as I said, what Tom shared with you. I'm going to look at some of what we call our quick stats about Greater Christchurch, and what this does is it gives you a picture of how things have changed over the last period of time since the earthquakes. And I'm also going to have a look at some of our key labour market and business demography statistics for the Canterbury region. Some of these highlights we actually put together specifically working with some people in this room. It was a collaborative effort. And when I talk about Greater Christchurch, I am in fact meaning the territorial authority areas of the Christchurch City Council, Selwyn and the Waimak districts. So I'm going to be moving pretty fast. I will tell you though that this afternoon you'll have the pleasure of listening to Gareth Meach. Those of you who go to that session, he's the acting GM for Census, and any detailed questions you have you'll be able to drill into them. So first up, you'll see from your screens, this is talking about the changes in the usually resident population, up 2.6%. We saw a decrease over the period in children aged 5 to 14 years, and something that Tom was referring to earlier as well. We've actually seen an increase in the number of people aged between 15 and 29 years who are male. And we'll come back to that figure later in the presentation. In terms of the school-aged children, by the way, the 5 to 14 years, 4% decrease in the greater area, but 9.7% decrease in the Christchurch City area. Now, Tom talked about cultural diversity. What we can see is that there has been an increase, and though it is slightly lower than nationally. One of the things I did want to focus on, given Tom's comments, was the overseas-born residents that have moved to New Zealand in the past 2 years, so they've been here since the earthquake. And you can see on the screen the 6 most common countries of birth, working through from England through China, Philippines, India, Australia and Ireland. Interestingly, of the people in Greater Christchurch who were born in England, only 8.6% arrived after the earthquakes, which contrasts with some of the other populations. In terms of the people who came from Ireland, over 54% arriving since the earthquakes, and 37% arriving from India since the earthquakes. As I said, more young males. You'll see this on your screen. There is definitely not a man drought in Christchurch, as with the rest of the country. And of those males who have arrived from overseas and are employed, as you can see on the screen, 25% are working in construction, and the majority in those areas coming from Ireland and England. But unfortunate to say, fewer females, less young females. And the top 3 industries for these groups are retail, trade, accommodation, healthcare and social assistance. As I said as well, fewer school-aged children, and as I said earlier, a 4% decrease You can see what it is for the various different districts and for the Christchurch city area, and the area units with the largest decreases being Bexley, Aranui and Dullington. Largest increases are those which, as you can see there, are people moving into new developments. Population movement. As Tom was saying, we've seen a lot of comings and goings, and since 2008, 81,000 people have arrived. You can see the number that are from overseas, from Auckland, and the proportion of people who have left. Moving along, given the time period. But the interesting thing is that most people actually remained in the area. Economists would describe this as being a sticky issue. So the Greater Christchurch population was, as you see it there, of the people living in the Greater Christchurch area, you can see that 48.6% of the people still lived at even the same address. And you can also see the change within the Greater Christchurch area there as well. So now we're going to actually have a look at where people are living. And we've seen a lot of change in dwellings across the Greater Christchurch area, and we have got some particular definitions that we use in this area. So when we talk about unoccupied dwellings, that includes empty dwellings and dwellings where residents were away on census night. Includes those where empty dwellings also include those who are being renovated or repaired. They don't include dwellings under construction. So you can see there was an 81% increase in unoccupied private dwellings, and that's significantly higher than the national average of 16.4%, which is not surprising. Christchurch City saw the greatest increase in unoccupied private dwellings. Waimak District increased 77.7%, and Selwyn close to the national average but still increased 26%. I'm now going to look at workplaces. So again, we can see a bit of movement here. The number of people working in Christchurch City, that's within the 4 avenues, halved between 2006 and 2013. But there are still almost 20,000 people working within the 4 avenues in 2013. There's been a corresponding increase in workers outside of the CBD. So we've seen professionals and managers move to Middleton, Riccarton and Addington. While in Yaldhurst, the western near the airport, we've seen an increase in technicians and trade workers. So now we're going to have a look at some of the key sectors in the Greater Christchurch. I particularly like this infographic. Construction is now the largest industry in the Greater Christchurch area, employing over 25,000 people. Manufacturing is down 17%. And interestingly, of those overseas-born new arrivals in New Zealand, half of those born in Ireland and Brazil were working in the construction industry. So we're just going to drill into this in a little bit more detail in terms of our labour market and industry statistics, and these come largely from the Household Labour Force Survey, and I'll also be drawing on our linked employee data set. You've seen a similar slide to this from Tom. So we can basically see the employment situation, clearly see the impact on employment in the Greater Christchurch area, but note as well that Greater Christchurch was already suffering the effects of drought and wider economic contraction over the 2007-2009 period anyway. You will see that it wasn't until 2012 that the employment outcomes returned to pre-quake levels. Lately, we've seen employment rate return to the levels we last saw in 2006, and as Tom was suggesting, 7 out of every 10 people over the age of 15 is in a job in Christchurch. The other great thing that we've seen is that the youth rate, which we describe as the NEET rate, which is not an employment educational training, continues to fall quite dramatically for for Christchurch. So as you can see, we've now got a youth NEET rate of 7.5%. So it's those youth who are 15 to 24 years old who are not in employment educational training. Some of those will be in NEET because they're caregiving, and in Greater Christchurch that's about 2,000 of the 5,000 young people who are described in that category. And it's continuing to fall. So digging in behind the industry changes, the growth in construction jobs has come, as you can see, from people moving into Canterbury, into a construction firm, but as Tom was suggesting, we've also seen 2,600 people already in Canterbury joining a construction firm, and they've come from people in the retail, accommodation, admin support companies, and as Tom says, something to keep an eye on. It's true that a picture tells 1,000 words, and here you can see the impact of the increases in employment numbers on the building work, or vice versa, in the region. The trend for Canterbury is more than double that at June 2011, in that quarter, and at this stage, the residential building growth is faster than non-residential. And my last slide. This is the Christchurch Retail Trade Indicator. This is actually an experimental series that we put together following the earthquake to provide some information for Christchurch on what was going on in retail. It uses GST figures. And as you can see from the graph, the long-term trend for Christchurch shows an increase of 20% since June 2010, which compares to a 14% increase nationally. Earlier this week, we released the most recent Christchurch retail trade statistics, and for the latest quarter, December 2013, the Christchurch retail and hospitality sales were up 3.5% when adjusted for seasonal effects, and at the national level, sales rose 1.2%. So as I said, not part of our standard releases. They were actually created specially for Christchurch, so the data is provisional, and we basically are checking it as we go, and we'll modify it if need be. So as I said, Gareth is going to cover some of this in more detail. He's just waving his hand around, and he'll be at the later session this afternoon. We've also got some other staff from Stats here if you want to ask some further questions. And at 11 o'clock, we'll be flashing up on the screens the latest regional GDP figures for Christchurch and the rest of the country. Thank you.